Joining us tonight to take this a bit further is Dr. Margaret Blaustein. She's a clinical psychologist and the founder-director of the Center for Trauma Training. Dr. Blaustein, thank you for being here. If people are watching this and wondering, okay, what are the signs I can watch for of a child maybe being abused, what are they typically?
You know, it's such a hard question to answer because trauma doesn't look like just one thing. And so, you know, I always say trauma in some ways is really an invisible pandemic, right? We talk about trauma and abuse with big incidents, but it happens, I think, most often silently in homes and in communities. And I never want people to overly read into things that they see, but certainly if you work with children and you work with kids who struggle with big emotions or big behaviors, I would never want to assume abuse, right? That's I think something that we want to be careful about, but always sort of assume that behavior comes from somewhere, that emotions have a reason. And so, you know, if I'm working with schools, with classrooms, with child care centers, to say if you have a child who's really struggling, don't assume that the child's doing it just to push your buttons, but that something may be going on underneath. And really to think in terms of support needs rather than investigation. Right? For most of us, our role is not investigation in the day-to-day. It's how do I best support this child and family?
Hearing that a child is being hurt in any way, it makes you sick. You know, a lot of people think, I'm going to go take care of this myself. But as you said, we are not the investigators. So how can we help? Because foster care, DCF, CPS, there are lots of good people in there, but there are also a lot of issues, and people get really skittish about steering a child that way. If we want to help, what is the best way?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the starting point, as long as it's safe to do so, is to be a relational support. To be a relational support to the child, if you're in relationship with them, to give kids a safe space to be. So to be safe, and you know, for a child to disclose abuse, for instance, they have to typically have some degree of relational safety with the person that they're speaking to, right? And so that's a starting point, but also to reach out to families when possible and to offer support to them. I really love when schools or child care centers have outreach programs for parents, because so often, you know, we sort of have this idea that there's, you know, the good child and the terrible caregivers or the bad people who are doing bad things. Most often what we have are stress systems, right? We have stress systems in which we have caregivers who are doing the best they can, often with very limited resources, often in an experience in which they have themselves experienced stress in systems of care and stress in their own families and stress in their own communities. And we're often looking at a lot of layers of stress here. And so the more that we can build up support resources, right, the better that we can do, not just for the child, but for their caregiving system.
If we can fast forward many years, Dr. Blaustein, if someone is hearing this and thinking, I experienced verbal or physical or emotional abuse as a kid, it's never quite resolved, how do you go about dealing with it as an adult?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the truth is, right, just given the statistics and given the numbers, abuse isn't rare, right? Childhood trauma isn't something that's uncommon. So a decent percentage of people in any group watching this will have themselves experienced abuse or trauma in childhood. And I think that for a start, to really give yourself permission to feel what you feel, to know that there is no right or wrong way to cope and metabolize. There's no straight line, right? It's very common for people to have gotten through one phase of their life where they feel like, I've got this down, right? I know who I am. I know what I want to do. I'm doing fine. And then something new happens. You have your own children, or you have a new experience, and old thoughts and feelings get really kicked up. I think reaching out for supports, whether that's through professional mental health supports, through peer groups, through spiritual counselors, there's a lot of resources out there. Tending to your body. Trauma leaves a mark on our bodies. It has a physiological impact. The experience of trauma has a deep imprint on our body's sense of safety in the world. And so the more we can tend to building that sense of physiological safety, things like, doing things that are active, or, things like yoga or exercise or other types of things that help our bodies to feel better can be important, and staying connected to people.
Dr. Margaret Blaustein, thank you so much. I love what you said about that. If you circle back to dealing with this in the future, that does not mean you're a failure or you didn't do it before. You're just dealing with it in a new way. I think that's great advice. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you for having me and for talking about this important subject.